development and academic spanning more than 20 years. Computing, machine learning, data science, and distributed systems. She is currently serving as head of the department in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering in University College, that is Osmania University, and also holds the position Director, ERP Cell, UCE, Osmania University, and in charge Cloud Computing Research Lab, TDC, UCE, Osmania University. She has several research publications in international journals to her credit. This is the introduction, and moving on to Professor Sudha.
Professor Sudha ma'am will be joining our session within a minute. So I request everyone to mute your microphones. Don't turn on the video or present your screen. Please don't click on present now, which is available on your screen, so that you will not be presenting it. At the end of the session, you will be asked to fill up a feedback form. If you only fill up the feedback form, we will be able to send you the notes as well as the entire meeting recordings. You can also find the entire meeting recordings further on our CSI MVSR YouTube channel. It will be available there from today evening.
A very good morning to one and all.
Good morning, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I'm glad that today we are talking of a very useful and very important topic for all the students. And I guess most of the students are very keen to know what are the advancements and what exactly they can, how exactly they can use this approach or cloud computing techniques and the changes that have happened in these areas. So I think yeah, what is we have started at the right time. I think I'll take for an hour, and I hope it would be a great session for all of you, because my intention is to see to it that you look at the changes that have happened. So the agenda would be a brief talk on what is distributed computing and what is cloud computing. How exactly does that happen to be the catalyst for growth, right? So then the next topic that that would be a part of this would be the design shift that has happened. That is design of monolithic architecture to microservices. Then I also would like to show some example application using microservices. I would also plan to talk about why you need service mesh. Probably we'll get some time to talk also about serverless and the use of functions. Of what I intend to do, I think I'll start. Please stop me in case you have doubts or something more you would like to discuss on this particular topic. Right? So I think the students here are already aware of the concepts of distributed computing, and maybe you have also studied something on cloud computing. Having said that, my intention of bringing in this idea of cloud computing as a background for this talk is to see to it that we can go on discussing about the latest changes that have happened in terms of design, in terms of architectures, in terms of frameworks, and also what enables the development of projects, or how exactly you can use all of these frameworks, these approaches for developing excellent solutions for your clients when you get placed in the near future. Now, I just brought in some snippets of news so that you get to know where exactly is this cloud computing position. Today, as you know, a lot of cloud service providers like Amazon or Microsoft and Google, they have all described significant growth in recently released financial earnings report. Now, as you know, today what we are doing is we are meeting here on Google, right? So there's a Google Meet. All the data that I stream, right? There is a Google recording that's happening. Similarly, there's a lot of data that I could be posting. All of this is enabled because of the Google Cloud services, right? Similarly, there are a lot of other providers cloud service providers, and you all must be using a lot of these services. You use Google Cloud for all of your Gmail. All the data gets stored over cloud, and then you are able to use from anywhere. I'm sure you're also using a lot of other services like Google Drive and a lot of other kind of solutions, which we have really changed the way we work. Because I stored my files on Google Drive, today I don't really need to carry hard disk. External hard disk, or I don't really need to carry that pen drive. The entire idea has changed. Now, in such situations when the pandemic has really affected all other kind of all kinds of companies, the service companies to banking to insurance to supply chain, everything has got disrupted. But as you can see from the numbers, how much profit or how much change in terms of revenue has happened at the cloud service providers. This is just to show you or just tell you the effect all of such kind of scenarios are bringing into cloud service providers, or just to say that how cloud has become a part of our lives, and more so because of such kind of situations wherein the users or the end users also do not have to even think of going out, or they are not in a position to even go out. So Google is up by 52% over year ago quarter, and for Microsoft's cloud group it is 27% gain or increase, whereas for Amazon it is up to 33% increase. Similarly, if you know, we are going to talk about Netflix again as an example. But what's happened is that just like all the other social media platforms like WhatsApp or Facebook, even Netflix, it has jumped to a great extent. Right? The traffic has increased, and obviously their increase in terms of profits would also be increased. Like Netflix or similarly Microsoft, there are a lot of teams who are using this online platforms like we are using today. So number of calls have increased, and obviously this is all possible because of the cloud services that they provide. I just thought of putting up this slide just to discuss or just to say what exactly has enabled, or what exactly is the change that we have seen over the last 10 years. The time frame, if you see, for the industrial revolutions or the shift from one kind of revolutionary approaches to other approaches in the entire civilization. Earlier, that shift happened over a period of 500 years. Then the shift came in a period of maybe 100 years. And then shift came maybe within 50 years, since the days when communications took over, and then telephones and maybe the electric bulb. All these are called as disruptors or disruptive technologies or disruptive inventions. Whereas if you see about cloud or cloud computing, this time frame is only 10 years. 10 years ago, computing was just heard of. People just heard what exactly is cloud computing. And today, everybody is on the cloud. All the students, everybody literally who uses WhatsApp or who uses internet for that matter, has got some service that they're using from the cloud providers. Yeah, before I can go ahead, I just want some confirmation from you that you're able to hear me properly.
Ma'am, this is one of the volunteer, Karthik. Actually,
Yeah?
your video is on and voice is breaking, ma'am.
Yeah, that's why I called. Just let me see. No, I think you're able to.
It is due to internet issues, ma'am. So please turn off the video so that it will be better, ma'am.
Turn off the video. No, but you want the projector, these slides to be projected.
Yes, ma'am, because I think it is because
Yes,
of...
ma'am, slides we want.
Only slides, ma'am. I think right now, along with the slides, we are able to see the video of yours, ma'am.
Got it. You're seeing the camera. Yeah, now I think you need to
Yes,
tell
ma'am,
me
done,
if this is better.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, this is better, ma'am. And please make it full screen, ma'am.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, is this good? Is this good? Yeah, I just want to know if you're able to see the full screen now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So we go ahead now. Now is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think we'll go ahead because there's a lot there are a lot of important things I wanted to discuss with the students so that you get to know what exactly, where exactly the world is going and what they could do for developing good projects. Right. So we were talking of the disruptive technologies or approaches. Cloud computing is the timeline is only 10 years. Within only 10 years, the entire change has happened. So from networks to, because of increase in networking, there's network sharing, and then there is information sharing, there is resource sharing. Today there are services that are shared. So in cloud computing, everything is given as a service over the web. I guess you already know about software as a service being available, which we use like WhatsApp or we use like Facebook. These are services that are available. So that is software as a service. There's a lot of other things which you must have studied as a part of cloud computing or distributed computing. You know about utility computing. There was a growth in terms of ubiquitous and so on. But then I'll skip this part because I guess you already know about World Wide Web. You must have studied in one or the other courses in your system. Now, talking about what exactly is the differentiating factor. Now, if you look at grid computing or cluster computing or utility computing, to the end user, it looks the same. I mean, to the end user, it is not known whether because of cluster computing there is increase in speed or increase in performance of the task that is being submitted. Similarly, the user would not really be able to know whether because of grid computing or what exactly is happening inside, but what really is the change, what really makes all this difference between grid and cloud and cluster is this core idea of something called as virtualization. This you must have studied in your maybe OS also, as to how virtualization really is a differentiating factor in terms of how operating system is made available to the users. Now, this is something I just thought we'll spend some 2 slides on this. Yeah, this is about before virtualization, you would have a single operating system and software and hardware being tightly coupled. This, as we know, is a uniprocessor system, single application, and only scheduling that could be done for would be having this application to run with this kind of operating system on this kind of architecture. Then, then came in this idea of virtualization. So if you use some kind of a virtualization layer, this could be VMware, this could be Zen, it could be any other that kind of a hypervisor that creates this virtualization layer. There could be an entire system, something like a new system coming up. That is, there's a collection of different kinds of hardware on top of which there could be a new operating system. We call this as guest operating system, and using which you could also be running your application on top of the operating system which you want. So in my single physical system, I'm having multiple units of application that I can run with my own operating system that I would like to use. Now, once the idea consolidated, they came up with 2 different variations of virtualization. For example, you could be having something called as hosted architecture type of virtualization or bare metal hypervisor kind of architecture. This again depends on, the development in this direction was based on different kinds of providers and and the applications of each of these. That brought in some more changes in terms of service-oriented architecture. Now, this is about the hardware, or this is about the hypervisor is not exactly a hardware, but something that makes change at the core level. Now, we are shifting from that level to something that is at the intermediate level, wherein the end users do not really know whether you are building the entire system as service-oriented architecture or what. But then this is something at a middle layer where you would like to build the entire system based on the idea of services. So, but the challenge was to make them interoperable and make them platform independent. We'll also see a comparison of this service-oriented architecture with microservices a little later. But then I wanted to bring in this idea of service-oriented architecture so that you can start thinking in terms of services. So all of the solutions, all of the software solutions that were designed, they started moving from some kind of custom made or specifically for one kind of a customer to something that can be built from various services. So I want you to see the shift kind of thing that happened, right? For example, if you're designing a banking application, or if you're designing a insurance kind of a solution, or you're doing a educational kind of organization based solution, for each of this, if you could write some kind of a service, what kind of a service? Something like a pay calculation, which is common service across all kinds of organizations. So this idea of service oriented architecture brought in a shift in terms of having to develop everything custom made for individual customers to developing as services. That also led to something like this. As you can see, the big maze that has happened. Big maze, different kinds of applications putting up a lot of services, too many people talking of too many services, and so on. So I think we just said about cloud computing, distributed computing. Now we'll try to see the shift from monolithic architecture to microservices architectures. So I guess these were the observed problems, wherein the area of consideration for which you saw this shift from monolithic to microservices are web systems, or such kind of systems which are built collaboratively by several development teams. Today, the kind of systems that are being put up, the kind of solutions that are being designed, need collaborative work by not one team or two teams or three teams who can sit across the table and discuss as to how to go about it, but rather several development teams. This is again important when you're talking of such kind of systems wherein the traffic load requires horizontal scaling. There are again different approaches when you start talking of scaling in terms of horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. Horizontal scaling is something where you go on adding more number of users or more kind of enhanced increase in terms of number of units that you would require. Now, again, if you're talking of units, I just wanted to clarify that what kind of units are we talking of depends on the kind of application. Now, let us say if I'm talking of a banking application. Now, what kind of horizontal scaling would you see? It is just like a new customers. The number of customers or the number of people who want to have an account with the banks has increased tremendously in the last 2-3 years. Now, for each of the customers that comes in, you would like to provide some set of services, some set of functionality from the bank needs to be provided as a basic functionality. Now, more the number of people, that kind of scaling is called as horizontal scaling. Whereas vertical scaling is for the same customers, you go on adding more features or you go on providing better services and so on as a part of that. That could be called as vertical scaling. Now, coming back to this, so wherein you require horizontal scaling, that is load balancing across multiple copies of the system. Now, what has happened is in such systems which were built in all these kind of systems which are built as monoliths or layered systems, it is always better to go with a microservices. Now we'll see again how this what really makes this difference. Now, as you can see from the picture, this is something called as monolith, something that is not built out of smaller pieces, but something that is put up as a single unit. Now, as what is a software monolith? Something that has one build and deployment unit. So it has one code base. We call it as code base. To say that the entire code happens to be doing one complete task, one single task. So the best that could be done was using one technology stack. So I think you must be knowing about technology stacks like LAMP stack or mean stack or SMAC stack. So this collection of all these technologies, something that is required for the back end, something for the databases, and something for the front end, and so on. So that entire part is technology stack. So this one collection would only be possible. You wouldn't have multiple such kinds of technology stacks running. Now, then why did they build? If what exactly was the idea behind building this kind of a monolith? The idea is that it is very simple mental model for the developers. You know what kind of technology stack would be used. If you are an expert in that, it would be simply very easy for you to go with that kind of development. Now, the second thing was simple scaling. It is a simple scaling model. So it was very easy to actually go on creating multiple copies and just put up some kind of a load balancer. Now, what exactly is a load balancer? If you have studied something of distributed computing, you must be knowing that some kind of tool. Today, it comes as a tool, right? What can be done is the tool actually checks whether the request for resources or requests that are coming can be allocated to different servers in a balanced manner, so that some kind of servers don't have very heavy load and then the delays don't happen. But then that is a brief talk about what is a load balancer. But then the idea is it makes very easy, right? But then what exactly were the problems that were faced with these software monoliths? Obviously, the idea is you go on adding more functionality or you go on adding more number of users, and you want to keep enhancing the existing system, right? So the code becomes too huge, and it becomes very difficult for the developers to actually start getting to understand it also. So development tools also get overburdened. So if you want to make some changes, refactoring means you want to make some changes to that kind of a code. It takes a lot of time, and building that kind of a code obviously takes much more time. And integrating this kind of a system which is built as a monolith, integration also takes huge amount of time. Obviously the problem again is scaling is limited. The entire system, like, it is like there is one single database and there is one single front end, more the number of users. Obviously the delays would go on increasing, so that causes this scaling to be limited. The other problem that they faced was deployment frequency is limited. That means once you find some error, once you find some kind of a problem, you would have to make some changes and redeploy. The problem is that once you want to redeploy for some particular period in time, you would have to take the entire system down, make the changes, and then deploy it at the servers where you would have already subscribed, or you would have published that this is the place from which we are deploying. That is a big challenge. That means you are halting the whole system. Now imagine what would happen if what happened when you would do a banking kind of application. For example, you're doing a banking application and there is some kind of a bug or some kind of problem that you find. You would have to halt all the operations for all of your customers, for all the across multiple centers or multiple places where this is being used, and tell to your customers that we are not able to provide service from so and so time to so and so time because there is some kind of redeployment that you would have to do. It is very much possible that if this frequency increases, you lose your customers. So what exactly is this monolithic to layered systems? Now, this is, I think, something that you must have done as a part of your second year or third year projects or second year or third year tasks, wherein you must have built some kind of presentation layer, some logic layer, and some kind of data access layer which accesses the database. Now, what is done is you use at most one technology stack per layer. So obviously what happens is you would have written some GUI kind of tool you must have used and prepared the forms, and then the core implementation logic you must have written, and that logic you could have written using JVM and EJBs and so on. And for the database access, you have some database and some kind of access mechanisms. This again looks very simple, but this is better than a monolith, but not so great. So still there would be huge code base. For each layer, you would still be writing a lot of code. So scaling is better as compared to a monolith, but still it is limited. And again, there are lots of issues when you're talking of communications and so on, because what the presentation, the team that develops this presentation layer or the user interface would exactly have to be understood by those who are developing the logic, or the converse. It is like those who are developing the logic would be able to say that this is how I can give you a These would be the fields I would require from a GUI from the user. Only if the user is not able to give one kind of input, the entire logic might fail. Similarly, the data that is captured, unless it is properly put into your databases and allowed for access at a later point in time, the entire data presentation to the end user would fail. It is something like what we were using some 10 years back and so on. Right? You had this online shopping or online banking, which they developed as a layered system, wherein the user interface was very rigid. That means if you had to enter your name in so and so format, it would have to be in that format only. Why? Because there are a lot of dependencies between presentation layer to logic layer and logic layer to data access layer. Today, you can have within your name, you can have a special character. Because today there are lots of changes in terms of databases, the kind of databases that are used as well. And today the kind of architecture has changed from being so strongly coupled. This is called as coupling, wherein there is a lot of dependency. That is called as strong coupling. There's not that much of coupling between these layers. So applications and teams that need to grow beyond these limits, which go on increasing, just like the applications of banking or the applications of supply chain and so on, and for that matter also in manufacturing. You look at the changes that have happened. All this led to increase, to a great increase. It's just like you're seeing on Amazon, on Netflix, and so on. That led to definition of microservices architecture principles. Now we'll start with what is this microservice and what exactly do you mean by microservices, and what exactly is this microservices architecture, and what really is the difference. So on the logical level, microservice architectures are defined by some functional system decomposition into manageable and independently deployable components. So we are saying that this is a functional system, but it can be decomposed into manageable and independently deployable components. Just like, whenever they give the definitions, each word means a lot, right? So this term microservice itself means it must be managed by a single development team, and functional system means that some kind of vertical slicing, right? We'll see what is that slicing, and independently deployable. Now, I guess you can see the picture very clearly. Now there's a big change in terms of what exactly is a microservice. You're seeing the collection of database along with multiple other things in that particular service. So each microservice is functionally complete. We call it as functionally complete. That means it can function on its own, right? It is complete with resource representation and data management. It has some mechanism for data management and for resource representation. Now, each microservice could be doing one particular task. What kind of task? It could be, you could be writing a microservice for a client. You could be writing some kind of a microservice for the shop items. You could be writing one microservice for the cards. You could also be writing one microservice for the checkout. Now, this is with reference to some example that they are talking of, like a online shopping site. I guess that has increased now. All of you must have done some kind of online shopping. So if you were to build that entire online shopping kind of a system, right, using a monolithic architecture, the kind of scaling that has happened because of this pandemic. The number of people who are doing online purchases has increased manifold. Earlier, most of us, quite a lot of people were going to the shops and trying to pick items from the supermarkets. But today, everybody is forced, and in kind of that is become much easier. That is the kind of scaling that can happen. So now what is being done is each of these various tasks that need to be done are written as microservices. Now the idea is, what we'll do is we'll have a look at how exactly are these microservices different. Now let me tell you, this is a important slide that we would like to talk about. Independent deployability is the key. So it enables the separation and independent evolution of code bases, technology stack, scaling, and it has some kind of special features as well. Now, what do we mean by independent code base? Each service has its own software repository. Each service, like just now we said, each cart could be one service, or some collection of items, verification of collection of items could be one service, billing part of it could be one service, talking to the bank is one kind of service, and so on. So like this, there could be number of services. So each service has its own software repository, and code base is maintainable for developers. Now, developers do not have to start reading the code, big, huge amount of code, and try to find out where exactly they need to make a change. It is something as simple as that. Suppose I was on my online shopping site, on my online shopping kind of system. Earlier, we were, you were not selling, let us say, you were not selling medicines. But now, because of this scenario, let us say you also want to add those items. You want to add the items relevant to medicines also to my entire shopping system. Now, if we did not have this idea of microservices that go into building this kind of a system, you would have to run through the entire code, try to go to some particular module where there is a big kind of code that makes access to these various kinds of items, and also make into your database. Right? Now that it is available as microservices, you know what change you need to make and where you want to make. Now that there are smaller code bases, tools also work fast, isn't it? It is easy to try to test. It is easy to try to build. It is easy to try to see what would happen if I change some particular line of code, or if I change some particular kind of data access mechanism. So service startup obviously takes only few seconds. Not, it is as simple as writing you write an efficient code, the compile time is less. You write a big code, it takes long amount of time. So if you're breaking up into smaller services, startup only takes seconds. And there are no accidental cross dependencies between code bases, because each code base is independent of each other. Now there are no cross dependencies. So that also leads to this idea of independent technology stacks. So each service is implemented on its own technology stack. The technology stack can be selected to fit the task best. This is a very big change and a great advantage. Earlier, all of your services, all of the application that you wanted to write, you would have to decide. You would have to make a decision prior whether you want to use lab stack or you want to use mean stack or what, in order to design the entire system. The challenge was that some applications would work better with some kind of tool that could be a part of the stack. For some kind of some other application, it would be useful for you to use MongoDB. Whereas for some particular regular kind of application, it is sufficient to use a SQL database like MySQL. So now the advantage is that each service can select its own technology stack, whatever that suits best. So teams can also experiment with new technologies within a single microservice, because now you are not going to affect other pieces of code. You can test within your own service. Okay? So there is no struggle to get your technology introduced to the canon, to everyone else, and to get it through. So no piggyback dependencies also. Now you don't have to, because of this change, that to the change and so on. You don't find that kind of problem now. We call them as lightweight. There are lots of technology stacks. We call them as lightweight these days, because you don't have to start about having to install a lot of stuff. You don't have to install everything. Right? So these are built like single processes that can start from command line. Now this some discussion if you get into containers and Kubernetes and things like that. But we'll leave that now. The other advantage obvious is that independent scaling. Just now I said about horizontal scaling and vertical scaling, and what would happen in current scenario, like the number of users have increased like anything. Similarly, you know about Netflix or Amazon, and you are able to watch the movies and so on. Number of people who are subscribed to this kind of services has grown like anything in the last 50 days, right? So that is what is scaling. Now, if you were to design the solutions as microservices, you would work across different types of scaling. For example, there is something called as horizontal and vertical scaling. Now, sometimes what happens is you need to slice this kind of scaling in another direction. There's something called as sharding. The data needs to be sliced. That is called as sharding. Sometimes what happens is you have to make smaller units of functional units. That is called as functional decomposition. This is all just to say that all this scaling would get very tough if you were not using microservices. Okay? So now, obviously, the advantage is that these bottlenecks which were stopping this kind of scaling, now there are no dependencies. So I add few more microservices. Right? I add some more scaling. I add some more pieces. There are some more features. Microservices can be extended without affecting other services. For example, you can deploy a new version of the UI without redeploying the whole system. This is what we just said, because you are having a microservice that does that on its own, right? So you can also keep replacing the service. Now we'll also see in some picture that's coming up as to how you can replace a service and completely rewrite without having to pull it down, without having to tell that to the user. Okay? That because the service interface remains the same. That means to the end user, you are providing some kind of stable interface. My interface remains the same. At the back end, I'm making some change to the code, but that the user doesn't have to see, user doesn't have to know. Now, just imagine what a big change this is as compared to your monolith or layered kind of structures. Now, the main advantage as to why this microservices are able to run so efficiently is because of stable or standardized communication mechanisms that they use. I think you already know about this, but I'll just run through this because this is what makes the entire concept of microservices to be used to such a great extent. Because of they using HTTPS and REST and JSON. So HTTPS is already tested to a great extent and broadly available transport protocol. REST is uniform interfaces are available on data as well as communication. And JSON, you already know, you must be knowing that simple data representation formats are used in JSON. So I think I can skip through this, but I just wanted to put these slides so that you know that these microservices use this kind of communication mechanisms. They use HTTPS and there is JSON, wherein popular data representation formats are used, and they are schemaless. The advantage of using JSON over HTTP, as you know, is they are schemaless. Any change that you want to put into the schema can easily be accommodated, right? Similarly, REST is an architectural style, right? So it is a state transfer, that is representational state transfer. So it describes how to build the systems on other protocols, right? There are some more architectural constraints with REST, but we'll go ahead with microservices and come back with how that compares to REST. Now, this is what is called as componentization. That means you are building smaller components. It is called as componentization via services. How do these components then interact? This interaction mode is called as share nothing, cross-process communication. They don't share anything. And across multiple processes, there is communication. Then they are independently deployable. For REST, you want public interfaces to be explicitly defined and explicitly made available. They are sized and designed for replaceability. That means it is not like a big bang, all or nothing. There are smaller units. You can keep replacing one and start using another. There are some challenges or difficulties as well. The communication is more expensive and interfaces need to be coarse grained. And then it's also the reallocation of responsibilities between services is a bit difficult. This is cross-functional teams. It favors the cross-functional teams. So line of separation that we had earlier was across different tier, data access tier, logic tier, presentation. now across different functionalities. Now, I think this picture speaks a lot about how this has become across functional boundaries and not across various tiers. Now, you have put up small microservices. Earlier, you had put all this together. Now, you have put them as smaller services. Now, what you can do, earlier you would have to, if you had to scale, you had to scale multiple units of all this. Now, what we can do is, you can see the some service which is of yellow color, all a collection of these services. Somebody wants only this service, somebody wants more of this blue service, somebody wants this. So this collection of various services can be used. Obviously, a very important advantage is there is decentralized governance. So it actually makes a big difference as to how they being managed, how this service is managed. Their entire data is not sitting at one place. The entire data access patterns have changed. So this single point of failure, having to do multiple replicas, and again looking for consistencies among multiple replicas. If you have studied databases, you know how difficult it is to ensure strong consistency. Has led to infrastructure automation. So I think this is what is big difference. Okay? So deployment is big. Going to deploy new services are coming up, you don't mind actually add services in their tomorrow if you give me another two services, PQRS and other services that do a better job, I can simply pull down A and replace that with P. I pull down C and I replace that with microservice. Don't stop my end users from accessing my system. Similarly, there is also automated failure detection. We'll come to this again. Some cases will help you to identify how they are doing this payment. Uh, like Google.
Ma'am, your voice is unclear, ma'am. Actually, you're not audible.
Oh,
Excuse me, ma'am.
yeah. Tell me if I'm audible now.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible now.
Now is it better? Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. Now tell me, you need to interrupt me in case there is some problem, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we are just trying to compare service-oriented architecture with microservices. These pictures I purposely pulled out. I spent some time on the net trying to pull out the right kind of pictures so that you would get to know the differences between this service-oriented architecture. As you can see, to build one kind of service, they would actually have to get I would have to get all of these services, and they would actually get something from various data stores, and we would have to put up some kind of a collection of these services that is called as orchestration there, right? So these services are not required to be self-contained data and UI. That's the difference of service-oriented architecture as compared to microservices. So service-oriented architecture is focusing on enabling business level programs. So they are not focusing on self-contained data and UI. So there is no possible independent deployments, right? So that was the challenge with service-oriented architecture. So service-oriented architecture is said to be coarse-grained, whereas microservices are said to be fine-grained. You could also compare this kind of component-based software engineering, which came somewhere around 20 years ago, if you have studied object-oriented approaches. So again, the challenge is that they are very broad, right? The idea is the same, that is to reuse. The idea of reusability is the same, but component-based approaches, they don't do this idea of smaller services which have the independent functionality, right? there are some prerequisites if you want to use microservices. You should have this idea of rapid provisioning. That means the development team should be able to automatically provision new infrastructure. That means if I'm saying, let's just say, suddenly we want to scale today in the morning because so many people have come up or so many people want to use some kind of service, I should be able to provide lot of infrastructure. That is where cloud computing is making a big difference in enabling the entire systems to work as microservices. There's no you putting up microservices if you are not able to scale. And if you want to really make all of these microservices work, back there needs to be some kind of infrastructure can be provided as and when there is a great demand, or as and when there is an increase in the number of resources, or when there is an increase in the number of calls for that particular service. So that dynamic reprovisioning or dynamic resource provisioning is what is done by a lot of cloud service providers. So cloud at the back end enables working of various microservices. This also needs basic monitoring systems which will allow you to detect the problems in complex systems landscape. Rapid action development deploy is also very important. I guess you can see the last I have given the source wherein where you could do this. Fowler.com is a very good source for those who want to learn more about microservices. There is something now that you can go because I've given the link to the next topic. I'll just I think I'll leave one of the slides with
Excuse me, ma'am.
Ma'am has left the meeting. There is a network issue. She will join within a minute.
Hello, are you able to hear me? Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, is this screen visible now? Is the screen visible now?
One
Hello.
minute. 1 minute.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Visible, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I think we were talking of microservices, right? Then we came to service mesh. We discussed service mesh and we said what is the importance of service mesh and what are the different implementations of service mesh. I think I'm not sure if you were able to all this. Can I discuss all this? Was a connection there? Hello. 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 Can you hear me?
Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Yes,
Hello.
ma'am. We can hear you. We can hear you, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
you need to answer, please, because as you know, I can't see you. So at least you need to answer. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So,
I think what we were saying, yeah, what we were saying was that the control plane and data plane of a service mesh enable us to the between like a data plane and control plane make it easy to manage multiple microservices. That is advantage of having a service mesh. Though it is a bit challenging because it slowly gets more and more complex, there are a lot of services that are available from different types of service providers today. Something like Istio, something like Airbnb Smart Stack, something like Nginx or Envoy. They're all working towards trying to provide good service by use of a service mesh. So what this service mesh, what is it that they're doing is they are providing orchestration of various services. It is just like an orchestra. You must have seen an orchestra. If not attended, at least you must have seen how they function. Somebody who plays a violin, somebody who plays a guitar, somebody who plays the drums, somebody who plays the some other instrument. They all work together to create that kind of a music. It is something like that. So Kubernetes or Istio, all of this, they enable use of these various microservices. So Istio, if they have to make all of these things to work together, there are some extra features that are made available, like the mixer or pilot and authentication and so on. The challenge is that there are so many different kinds of services available as pods, right? So having said that, now I'll just go to something that I want to talk about, serverless. Before we go to that, I'll just stop here for a second so that you can look at what is done in case of a shopping cart. Shopping cart. We need to have some kind of microservices for a catalog, for a supplier, similarly for checkout, for managing the data on Redis, and so on. Now, to manage all of this, there are some more. The code for supplier could be written in Node.js. For catalog, it could be written in .NET, right? And there's a database. To manage all of this, they are using something like Envoy. A collection of all of this again are being managed by something called as Ambassador. So these all are running in small containers, right? They on containers of their own. So that is being managed by Kubernetes. So this is something you could take up as a small project. Please try to work on taking up a small project like a shopping cart. And what you need to focus on is smaller services written in different programming languages. And similarly, for a front end, you could be writing something. For back end, you could be having different kinds of data stores and so on. But each could be a part of your smaller microservice and how you could be doing this kind of orchestration. Now that brings us to serverless applications. What is serverless? Now, for this example, I have taken Google's infrastructure just to show you that there are so many features available in Google's infrastructure which enable or which make serverless applications possible. So this is something like, this is something where we are showing that load balancing is. So I guess you can see this, right? There's instance 1 and instance 2, and how instances would look after load balancing. Initially, the load was not balanced, and then slowly the load got balanced. Sometimes it was over, sometimes it was under, right?
Ma'am,
Oh,
I'm sorry to disturb you,
yeah.
but your voice is frequently breaking, ma'am.
I think the challenge here is I'm at the university, so there's a little problem at the university because of
Okay,
this.
ma'am, we can hear you now.
I think, yeah, I'm changing my position here to see that I'm nearer to the window. Now,
Okay,
I
ma'am,
think we'll also run through some of this monoliths versus microservices, because this is something we already covered, right? Now, what exactly is this serverless architecture? It is not that we don't use servers. It is rather that we don't have to think about servers. We don't have to worry about infrastructure. We don't have to worry about security updates or scaling the capacity. Now, that is what is by use of cloud. So I'm sure you must.
Ma'am, you're not audible, ma'am.
To bother about all this.
Actually, we can't hear.
This is being managed. Is it better? I don't know. Now, are you able to hear better? No. Changing my position. Hello.
Actually, we can hear you for some time, but after some time it is breaking. But it is fine, ma'am. Now, hello.
Hello. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, ma'am. But your
Can
voice
you
is
hear
going
me
totally
now?
mute, ma'am. We can't. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
No, no, this is a problem because I'm at the university is here. Because I'm connected to my mobile, on my mobile. Hello. Yeah, Harita, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now we can hear you.
I don't know. It is getting disconnected. I am on my mobile connection. I am on my Wi-Fi through my mobile. So I think there is a challenge with this. Anyhow, I think I'll complete now. I'll complete in another few slides. Okay.
Yes.
Hello. Can you
Okay,
hear?
ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to complete this saying that what is serverless? It is not that we don't use servers, it is that we don't have to think of them. We only pay for what we use and they are event driven. So that is what is advantage of serverless. So obviously what happens is they are being given by Google Cloud as functions. Directly the functions as available. These are also being called as ephemeral functions. Ephemeral functions. So what happens is there are a lot of background functions which are helpful for cloud storage. There are also something called as publisher subscriber, cloud pub sub, and there are obviously HTTP functions. So again, there are ways by which you could invoke these cloud functions asynchronously or synchronously. Asynchronously, they are invoked by cloud events, and synchronously, they are invoked over HTTPS. Now, I think I can skip this because you know how they are called. Event-based calls are being made. Now, a lot of all this information is available if you just go to Google Compute Cloud, right? So, what happens when they are? If you can look at this particular example, what we are talking of is your sentiment analysis by use of cloud functions. You must have worked on some kind of examples wherein we do sentiment analysis. The advantage obviously is that you just create some kind of HTML function. That what that does is it captures the that can read or that can capture from some particular comment that is given. Just like we comment on Twitter or you comment as your response to some product that you have purchased and so on. So from that, it captures all of this and puts that in the pub sub function. Where is this available? This is available as a function on Google Compute Cloud. Similarly, it directly gives some function for processing of this comment. It uses the NLP API and saves in the data store. Now, if there are ready-made functions that are available from Google Cloud, how easy it is for you to start doing a project for doing sentiment analysis. You don't have to write huge amount of code, right? Simply the result of that analysis would be available. So you don't have to manage the servers. You can scale independently, pay only for what you use because it is event driven. As and when some particular event happens, then it triggers another function. It triggers some other function. So cloud debugging without blocking the threads and auto authored with to other Google services. So there are few resources I just want you to just check. Are you able to see the Word file? Are you able to see the Word file? No?
No, ma'am, we cannot see, ma'am.
Yeah. I'll just share. I'll share. Yeah. I want the students to please see this Word file. Can you see now? Word.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. If you could
Word
take
document.
down this, Word document. I can share this later with. I can share this with Harita. Those of you who are interested, you could note down these links. This will help you to start working in that direction of building some applications using microservices. There are also a lot of links available on Google Cloud. Just go to Google Cloud and play around because they are providing for free. They are providing to some particular limit. They are providing all the services for free. So those of you who want to really start doing projects, you can just check this link. It directly takes you to that Google Cloud, right? And a lot of customers related information is available there. Design yours. For example, if you're just checking with kind of supply chain, design a solution for supply chain. Today, as you know, what is happening is there are a lot of issues with red zones and greens and so on. So if some alternate mechanism by which the supply chain can be managed, is there some solution or banking? With in banking, there are some challenges. Can you convert some of the requirements for taking the cash, hard cash, to something that ATMs can handle? I'm just throwing some ideas which can be done by using this idea of microservices and going with service mesh, and to work on all this by using some service provider like Google Computer Cloud. So I'm done. If yeah, Harita, are you there?
Yes,
Harita, are
ma'am.
you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So okay, done. She's here.
Done. Okay, okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Can we stop?
Wait for 2 minutes, ma'am. Vote of thanks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
On behalf of CSI MBS Faculty, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have directly and indirectly contributed to this webinar on cloud computing organized by our organization. At the outset, I thank our speaker, Professor P. Sudha. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence.
You are audible, Mr.
thankful to
Jitesh.
our faculty advisors. We are thankful to our faculty advisors for their motivation. A special thanks to the student coordinator. Thanks for active participation. We move to the end of today's webinar. Thank you.